was looking around YouTube minding my own business. I started watching one video and like a chain reaction, one led to another and landed on this. Impaulsive, a podcast by Logan Paul. This one was on the Kent State gun girl without her guns, Kaitlin Bennett. She originally made headlines with this picture posted on her graduation day to make a point that the previous day before her graduation, she was not allowed as a student to have a gun on campus, but any visitor can bring a gun, which can be a problem because there are unarmed students and faculty at this school, and it makes no sense to allow someone outside the school to come in with a gun, yet you can't protect yourself with a gun. Bold statement. So they decided to interview her, and she completely rocked this interview. And if you're wondering if I'm for gun ownership, yes I am. But that is not the point of this video. Since this channel is called Check the Facts, we will be looking at some facts today. After watching this interview, I noted 7 points that need to be addressed. There were no real facts coming from them. Their views were mostly broad, general, and even based a little on feelings too. But I'm not judging them. If that's how they feel about it, that's fine. Not everyone likes the idea of guns. They did a good job with the questions. So here we go. Kaitlin argued that the TSA is not doing a good job and needs to be privatized. Being once again under federal rule, it's not working out so great, so what can privatizing do? According to Newsweek, TSA is a disaster and should be privatized. The Department of Homeland Security carried out covert tests on Transportation Security Administration, and the results show that the TSA screeners fail to detect weapons, drugs, and explosives almost 80% of the time. While the exact failure rate is classified, multiple sources indicate it is greater than 70%. So basically it's between 70 and 100%. CBS, TSA screenings fail to spot weapons most of the time. An undercover operation has revealed that Transportation Security Administration screenings at airports fail for the most part. Again, 70 to 100% between that. This is from Homeland Security Newswire. House Representatives battle for control of TSA. Since TSA is under government control, John Micah, a representative of New York, is trying to get the TSA to hire private contractors to conduct airport screenings. But there's more. Ex-TSA agent says we steal from travelers all the time. The agency says it has a zero-tolerance policy for theft and terminates the contracts of all thieves within the TSA. In the past 10 years, almost 400 TSA officers have been fired for stealing. From USA Today, TSA pays millions for bag claims. What happens to your confiscated stuff? They're auctioned off. No joke. So what is the deal with privatizing? How is that better? The TSA is currently responsible for screening passengers and cargo on flights, but despite the increase in funding since 9/11, the TSA still struggles to provide effective and efficient screening services. Okay, so check it out. In 2016, airports across the country experienced long wait times, so they resulted in hiring additional officers and paying more for overtime. But there's two problems here. One, it shows how bad the struggle is, as this article states, but two, it doesn't solve the problem. You rush something, the job doesn't get done right. So the Screening Partnership Program substitutes private screeners with Transportation Security Administration oversight in place of federal administration screeners. Simply put, that means private screeners should be used, federal administration should be out. Using the Screening Partnership Program increases productivity and keeps costs down. As always, you have access to everything that I accessed in the description box. My sources are available for you all to see and read thoroughly if you want. I don't keep anything hidden from anyone. A study by the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in 2011 found that Screening Partnership Program screening at San Francisco was up to 65% more efficient than its federal counterpart screening at Los Angeles. But the pros and cons. Pro, contractors provide a more flexible workforce for airports, and when something goes wrong, the employee gets booted immediately. Any employee situation is dealt with even better because the government already has too much to do. It can't oversee every single thing in this country. But here's the argument. Some believe that the national security should be a federal government operation and not turned over to for-profit private companies. Why? Because people like him believe that people shouldn't wait a long time in lines. Looking down, he says, when long lines hit this summer, the discussion wasn't about labor or national security. So in a way, he kind of admitted that national security is not a priority, it's long lines. So You have to ask yourself, what is more important, your security and safety on a plane or waiting in a line? Because really, this is a bad argument. Who seriously thinks that? The downside of private contractors is that sometimes they fall through, and it takes time for a new contractor to get up to speed. Not too big of a con, but it matters. Let's take a look at cost. At San Francisco International Airport, where passenger screening is privatized, it costs $2.42 per passenger. But the cost at Los Angeles International Airport, where TSA handles passenger screening, is $4.22. Look at the numbers. You guys would have to ask yourself this question. Do you want stronger, better security at a lower price, or do you want more expensive, lax security just to stay away from long lines? I vote a little longer wait is worth it if we are going to be safe, but that's just my opinion. Overall, random tests of security at airports in the US with privatized security show screeners to be as much as 65% more efficient than their counterparts in the TSA. Efficiency is based on detecting banned items and number of passengers screened, as well as fewer complaints. Do we need them? Maybe. Do we want them? For sure. Why do we want them? Let's take a look. This is an Armalite 10. I won't get into the full details, but it shoots more rounds and it's scarier. This is a handgun. Depending on the caliber and barrel length, the capacity is less than the AR-10. Which one do you think your enemy or intruder would be most fearful of? This one or this one? Because in the end, besides the rounds you can shoot, it depends on which one can frighten someone away faster. No one says you have to use it. The intruder just has to look at it and be afraid. And Kaitlin made that point. The AR-10 packs more visual and physical power than a handgun. Kaitlin made a good point here. Whether you believe in God or not, protecting your family and yourself is a right, not a privilege. Note the word protect. How do you protect yourself? Because people have weapons. Are you going to get down on your knees and beg? Are you going to say please? Are you going to bribe? In an emergency situation, you protect in any way. This is where a weapon, any weapon, becomes a right. And a gun happens to be a weapon. And it's the weapon of choice because you can shoot from a distance. Not everyone is Jet Li. For sure not Bruce Lee. If we were all ninjas, we might not have need for guns. I take a biblical point of view. I've always said this when I needed to in my videos, especially in my intro video. It is a God-given right to defend ourselves. Oh yeah, you say? I say yeah. This article explained it so well that I'm using it. Every creature on the planet has the natural right to use whatever means necessary to defend itself. Life feeds on life. Nature is brutal and doesn't show mercy. Wolves eat their larger prey hind end first while the animal cries out for help. Are we to tell the buck being chased by the wolf that it cannot turn on its attackers and gore them? Why then cannot we extend this simple logic to humans? Humans dress it up nicely in morality codes that can and do change. But at its simplest level, every organism has a natural right to defend its life by any means necessary. Soldiers, taking a biblical perspective, and those of you who don't care about biblical anything, the example of soldiers still stands, Bible or not. God called on Israel's citizens to be soldiers on numerous occasions to defend their people, property, and land. In Genesis, Abraham rallied trained men to save his kidnapped nephew Lot, and it was credited to Abraham as righteous because what he did was self-defense. That was his nephew, his family. What are you gonna do? Let's all just get down and cry like little girls. Maybe the enemy will have sympathy and give back what they stole. Nehemiah. When the walls of the city were built to keep people out, kind of like the walls that we need to have today for our country, civilians, not soldiers, used whatever they needed, swords, spears, bows, sticks, anything to protect their family and the people as they worked on the wall, because there were people who were opposed to the wall, hint hint, and could easily have attacked and killed them. What they were doing was self-defense. Before the enemy attacked, they were prepared. Esther. When the king's decree went out to destroy all the Jews and he couldn't take it back, the only thing he could do was to tell them that they should prepare themselves in any way necessary to defend themselves. No matter who they are, what position, get your weapons, defend yourselves. The disciples were expected to be armed even in the presence of Jesus. He didn't say they couldn't be. Surprise, surprise, Jesus was not a pacifist. Self-defense tools. The nation of Israel were slaves to the Egyptians. Slaves were not allowed to have any kind of weapon to defend themselves. Only free people could use weapons. So when they left Egypt, they armed themselves and left with weapons. Why? Because Egypt was not over the fact that they were losing slaves. meaning the Jews. So in case of an attack, which did come and didn't work, at least they would be able to defend themselves. Two of the greatest warriors in the Bible, Joshua and David, they killed a lot of people. Those people were enemies. Enemies try to kill you, torture you, steal from you, do all kinds of harm and wrong. So before they do it and continue to do it if nothing is done, weapons are used to defend. And the final thing, which is biblical, protect the weak. How do you protect the weak? With weapons when you need it. Back then they didn't have guns. They had swords, they had knives. A sword to them is the equivalent of a gun to us. People, stop being so afraid of guns. Guns don't kill, people do. Guns are not bad, people are. Just like swords don't kill, people do. Swords are not bad, people are. Trigger warning ahead. You will be outraged. These stats are not what you expected. Also, you've been lied to. By who, you ask? Oh, just the media. The usual, you know. Deaths from gun violence. How the US compares with the rest of the world. Now, a lot of people who are against guns would see this and say, see, look, I told you. The rest of the world is at peace and the US is so bad. By the way, this was taken by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. Okay, but here's what you miss. Notice the title said the US compared to the rest of the world. Look at these countries. Do these countries make up the entire rest of the world or just a little part of the world? Because I'm about to make a very big point. Okay, ready? What? No. Now, how about this? No, the US is not way low on the scale. It's somewhere around the middle or high up there. But the point is the US is not the country with the highest rate of violent gun death. Also, just to let you know, this doesn't include armed conflict and from accidents or self-harm. Keep looking. What has the media been shoving down our throats this whole time? The US is the highest perpetrator in the world for gun crimes or gun-related crimes. But they don't show you the whole world. In fact, what I'm showing you is not the whole world either. But I want to take it back to the first chart, Venezuela. The people in Venezuela have no guns and so therefore no power. MSNBC reporter Kerry Sanders unwittingly made the American case for the Second Amendment during a report Tuesday on the political upheaval in Venezuela. In terms of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, not only is he hanging on, but he appears to still control the military, Sanders said. You have to understand, in Venezuela, gun ownership is not something that's open to everybody. So if the military have the guns, they have the power. And as long as Nicolas Maduro controls the military, he controls the country. Here's another stat chart from Forbes. Where is the US? Venezuela is at the top. From the FBI website, I want you guys to look at this list of weapons. Did you ever stop to consider that there are more weapons than a gun? When someone usually says weapon, the first thing that comes to mind is gun. Take a look at these cases or deaths caused by guns and then other weapons. Eliminate guns and you still have cases caused by other weapons. No matter if guns are taken out of the US completely, this stuff is not going to go away. You guys have to understand, banning guns, even if we take it to the extremes and not have one trace of evidence that there is a gun in this entire country, people will resort to using the next best thing. A knife, a bat, a stick, a metal rod. So if knives are the next best thing, are we going to stop selling knives at stores for kitchens? Because that is going to be the next ban. And then when knives are completely taken out of the US and we have nothing to cut anything with, let's say baseball bats are going to be used. Are we going to stop producing baseball bats and no longer play the game of baseball? Because the next thing you're going to see is baseball bats are going to be banned. But here's another thing no one stopped to think of. There is a black market out there. Even if there were no guns in the United States at all, someone is going to buy guns on the black market, usually drug cartels or gangsters. And when they have access and control to guns, they have power. Who is going to save themselves or protect their family when they have no means? You think other countries don't have the black market either? In regards to suicides, does that mean access to a firearm is really only a risk factor for people showing clear signs of mental illness? People would argue that you can't sell guns to people because you have to screen them and because they might have suicidal tendencies. Yes, screening is important, but in this article, when someone is suicidal, it's in the moment, it's impulsive. It takes time to get a gun because background checks are still done in a lot of places. Guns also cost a lot of money. When someone is impulsive, they don't wait to get a gun. They go and do whatever it is that they have in their mind to do. Unless a gun is available in the house, no way that they are going to take the time to get a gun. Their plan is fresh in their mind. Here's another fact no one tells you, especially in the media. Guns save more lives than they take away. Guns used 2.5 million times a year in self-defense. Law-abiding citizens use guns to defend themselves against criminals as many as 2.5 million times a year, or about 6,850 times a day. This means that each year firearms are used more than 80 times more often to protect the lives of honest citizens than to take lives. Of that 2.5 million, the majority only brandish their gun or firearm as a warning, or they may give out a warning shot to scare attackers. Nobody there is shooting. The point here is not to shoot to kill, it's to shoot to scare, or not shoot at all, just show your gun. Less than 8% of the time, a citizen will kill or wound his or her attacker. As many as 200,000 women use a gun every year to defend themselves against sexual abuse. And the best one of them all, even anti-gun Clinton researchers can see that guns are used 1.5 million times annually for self-defense. Pause and read the rest for yourself or check out the full source page in the description box. In a poll, a criminal is not going to mess around with a victim he knows is armed with a gun. 60% of felons polled agreed. One reason burglars avoid houses when people are at home is that they fear being shot during the crime. 74% of felons agreed. Criminals are more worried about meeting an armed victim than they are about running into the police. 57% agreed. However, this data is from 30 years ago. This poll was part of the data on the page, so you again can check it out in the sources page in the description box. So why would I show you this? Because it says for over 30 years, the United States Department of Justice has understood that gun ownership rates may correlate with reduced violent crime, not an increase, and this is what I wanted to show you. Reduced violence doesn't come from reducing guns. When criminals know that more guns are out there and they have a better chance of being shot or hurt, they're not willing to risk their lives. Yes, there are those few that are thrill seekers and are willing to take their lives in their hands, but many of them do not want that. From yet another article and a survey, almost all national survey estimates indicate that defensive gun uses by victims are at least as common as offensive uses by criminals, with estimates of annual uses ranging from about 500,000 to more than 3 million in the context of about 300,000 violent crimes involving firearms in 2008. Another study estimates there are about 1 million defensive gun uses per year for self-protection or for the protection of property at home, work, or elsewhere. This does not include military, police, or security guard. There are about 162,000 cases per year where someone almost certainly would have been killed if they had not used a gun for protection. Guess what? 98% of mass shootings take place in gun-free zones. And you're probably thinking, but why would they do that? It's a gun-free zone. Shouldn't it automatically just repel bad guys? No. What that means is you're leaving people as sitting ducks while other people on the outside, visitors and non-members of this institution or organization or whatever building it is that anyone is part of, they get to carry firearms concealed. So if they feel psychotic, they can come in and start shooting people while everyone else is defenseless. Republican House Speaker Richard Corcoran wants to get rid of gun-free zones in schools and military bases. Why? Most of these mass shootings take place in arenas, meaning places, where you're not allowed to have a concealed weapon permit. People who commit mass shootings say they chose certain areas because they knew nobody had guns. That raises an interesting question, but it separates from the focus of this fact check, whether most mass shootings happen in places where concealed carry permits don't apply or gun-free zones. Here's what we're going to end up with. It's not that it's a gun-free zone, it's a defense-free zone, meaning people are not allowed to defend themselves. Further meaning criminals come in, do what you will, nobody here is armed. And it's convenient just for you. And guess what else? A sign that says gun-free zone does not automatically magically repel a criminal. It's more of an invite. In the past mass shootings, if people would have been armed, those shooters would have been put down before the police even got there. Behold, the 10th Amendment. In the past 2 years, 3 years, people have become more familiar with the First and Second Amendment, and that's pretty much all they know. There are 10 total amendments in the Bill of Rights, but 27 total amendments in the Constitution. I'm showing you this because the 10th Amendment limits the power of the federal government. And why would that be? Because the founding fathers wanted as much power as possible to be retained in local state legislature. If the federal government had too much power, then we would be in the same predicament we actually are today. The powers that only the federal government should have, and is included, is declaring war on other nations, printing money, establishing and supporting military forces, such as the Army and Navy, regulating international and interest trade, running and funding the postal system. These are directly in the Constitution or have been interpreted as constitutional by the Supreme Court. Anything outside of that should be powered by the state, which includes gun laws. I bring this up because businesses are bound to comply by the laws of, you guessed it, federal government. And once again, I mentioned that they are taking on too much, and when too much work is taken on, it cannot be efficiently executed. The idea that Kaitlin was talking about was that if businesses were under the rule or laws of the state, buying a gun would not be as big of a mess as we are in today. Private business reputation is on the line, plus the state can better oversee the laws and rules. Guns can be traced back to shops. So even if the shop is crappy, if anything happens, cops are at their door. This means businesses can do their own background checks, mental health exams. They can really amp it up because the federal laws are just so general. That's why a lot of people can get guns. People who should not be getting guns. I usually don't use blogs as anything, especially examples, but this one was just kind of good. I had to use it. So this guy had an idea. Back in the 80s, when America was up in arms about drunk driving, the drinking age was narrowed. So Congress passed the National Minimum Drinking Age Act. The act stated you must raise the drinking age in your state to 21 by such and such a date, and if you don't, the federal government is going to dock you 10% of your highway money. At the time in 1980, yes, that was a big deal. So here's what this guy believes. Congress should tell states in the wake of this surely worse epidemic of gun violence that they must put some substance into the phrase well-regulated militia. They must define well-regulated militia to include not only the National Guard, but all legally registered gun owners in the state. If they fail to do so, and in line with the precedent set by the Drinking Age Act, they risk losing 10% of their federal law enforcement funding. Gun owners would not be required to report for service, but their membership in this broader militia would come with certain responsibilities. Threatening financial penalties would make states get in line pretty fast. So the powers should be left to the states, and the government should be used to penalize anyone who does not follow the state laws. That I can agree with, because when the states crack down, things will change. If people don't follow the rules of the state, or the state doesn't fully implement new laws set by them, meaning business owners aren't following the new rules of the state, the federal government then can crack down on them. The idea here is not to penalize 10% of whatever, it's to penalize in general. Something, anything. Something that would really hurt enough so that people can wake up and sell guns in every location using a thorough background check, mental health, and anything else necessary to make sure that guns are being put in the right hands, not the wrong ones. Do we have enough shoes? Do we ever have enough clothes? But you can't compare clothes to guns. Okay then. Do you have enough knives in your kitchen? As people feel the need to keep replacing, buying, and accumulating things? How about baseball bats? Do we ever have enough pepper spray? All these things I'm mentioning, they're all property. Guns are property. You don't take away someone's property just because you feel threatened by their property. A guest coming into my house does not call the police on me just because I have a knife set on my kitchen counter and she feels threatened or he feels threatened. You know, we're starting out with signs like these, no guns allowed. But if ever it gets to the point where we are not allowed to have guns, which, you know, civil war will come around if that's the case. But let's say it doesn't, we don't have a civil war, and everyone has their guns taken away from them or restricted, the next best weapon will be a knife. And then we're going to have signs like these, no knives allowed. And once knives are docked, and we will all be made to eat finger foods, we'll have signs like these, no pepper spray allowed, because it can possibly hurt a criminal. And then we're going to move on to this, no baseball bats allowed, because baseball bats can damage people. And when we are left with nothing but our fists to defend ourselves, we are going to end up with these signs. If you guys are wondering, oh my goodness, check the facts, why is your video so long? Well, that's because I like to be thorough. If you take a look at all of my videos on my channel, Most of them are 10 minutes or about 10 minutes, but the big ones, the most heavy topics, are going to be 20 minutes or longer because there is just so much to cover and I want to make sure you have your information. Once again, sources are in the description box made available to you. Most of the sources are from websites, but sometimes I use sources that are not available on the internet and I want you guys to have them. And remember, it's okay to still not like guns or be for them. This video was not to tell you how to feel or to turn you from anti-gun to pro-gun. It's just facts. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Make sure your notification bell is turned on so you can get updates for new videos and answers to your comments.
Educate yourself!